Welcome to the Shulamite Podcast, an extension of Shulamite Ministries and Shulamite.com, with weekly interviews and teaching with author and speaker Martha Kilpatrick and hosted by John Enslow. This weekly podcast is a way to stay connected to the ministry. So come experience anointed messages, not giving just another method, but a living impartation.
He says in Matthew in the Beatitudes, all through the Bible, it's about don't worry. You worry about clothes? Don't worry about clothes. You'll have clothes. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. That's not your life. There's something better than just worrying about clothes and and everything human.
Well, you know, this whole season of our country and our world is very anxious. COVID, the whole crisis with COVID has been a pandemic, but it's been an epidemic. It has made an epidemic of fear. It's been an epidemic, and I believe the true pandemic is fear and anxiety. And I mean, if we are fighting a virus, to have anxiousness put on top of that, it's making us more susceptible to it and vulnerable to it. So fear is never going to be a beneficial thing to bring health and healing and wholeness.
Well, I remember when the nurse said we had an encounter with a nurse on the hospital.
Oh yeah, we were at the hospital and we were checking out your heart and making sure everything was okay. And she said that if people would just be normal and just calm and normal and respond how we've always told people to respond, the hospitals wouldn't be full. But people are freaked out and scared and anxious. And the word is anxious. They are anxious. We have been made to be anxious, and the anxious
is the goal of the helpers to make it anxious for you.
Well, it does. If you remember, when I did the sheep and the they were up on that hill, I used fear to motivate them to get down, because I had busted myself several times and I needed them to move to the barn because I knew that they could break their legs. And I became a greater fear than their fear. And so I screamed and ran at them, and they were like, oh my gosh, and ran immediately back to the barn where they needed to be, where there was safety. And fear can be a motivator. And, you know, even when we're growing up, our parents can use fear. Oh, if you do that, you'll poke your eye out, or you'll go blind, or whatever,
But that's true.
But we use fear as a motivator, but fear as a source of life is death.
Well, you say in here, I know so many people who dwell daily in anxiety, perhaps all of their lives. You just make it so visible. We kind of live with it and we don't think much of it, but you have made it. You have exposed the evil of anxiety. Do you see that in?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And as a child, I told you, I was anxious. I was an anxious child. My parents took me one time to Disney, and I was afraid of every single ride because I thought I was going to die. I had an inordinate fear of death, and I was anxious, and it paralyzed me. And so for living in that and experiencing that as I grew up, and then to now not have anxiousness as my source, it's not that I can't get anxious about things. This is not like the end all to be all. I will never have anxiety again. This is destroying the stronghold of anxiety that is controlling lives. And then it's a stronghold.
That's incredible. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but you are so passionate to defeat anxiety, and you're so passionate to want the church, Christians, to be free of all people who need to be free of anxiety would be born-again believers who have everything we need. It says the Father knows what you need before you ask. Just let him be Father. Oh, I love this message, John. It is really incredible. And now let me read this scripture, and then I'm going to turn it over to John for his commentary and what he understands about it so we can learn from him. I just want to give you one more scripture, Isaiah 35:4. Say to those who have an anxious heart, and it's in the heart, isn't it, John?
Absolutely.
Be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, with the recompense of God. He will come and save you. So tell me how that speaks to you in your journey about anxiety.
Well, I say here, anxiety is fear, and fear is faith in something other than God. And really, if you put it down to the core level, anxiety becomes our source in God. We literally worship it. We worship anxiety because it gives us the motivation. It gives us the energy. Adrenaline is a powerful drug to motivate us, to get us going, and it's intended to be used when we're trying to run away from something that is or figure something that is an immediate danger. But if you live in that problem, if you live in using adrenaline as your source, it will haul you out eventually. And the reason I want the church to really see this is because when we have anxiety as source, and there's so many anxious people in the church, when we have anxiety as source, we are thwarting God's power and presence in our life, the experience of Him as Lord in our life, and that's tragic.
You have in the forward section here. So the consequence of an anxious heart is that it separates me from my consciousness of God and leaves me floundering in a soup of unrest. It's kind of like if you want to worry, you're going to be alone.
Yeah, it does isolate. Anxiety isolates us.
Wow, I never saw it that way, John. So the balance of this book is fabulous because it goes from commentary to the Word, back to the Word, then to the personal. And there's no way in this little conversation to get everything that this book is. And you make the remedy and the solution to be our God.
Here's a quote from Watchman Nee that says, the world is an anxious place. We seem to let it fuel us to perform. What then is the use of being anxious? And then it gives the scripture reference, which of you, by being anxious, can add 1 cubit and measure of his life?
I have this funny story in here, and it happens to be true. Then you come to bitterness paired with anxiety. And I would not have put those two together, but it's absolutely brilliant because it is that paired with anxiety is bitterness.
Yeah, if you're an anxious person, for too long, you will be a bitter person because you are robbed of life and joy. You are vanquished of all true fulfillment in life because you're bound by the chaos and by the fear.
And the chaos eats you up.
I tell on myself with that, with my little 5-year-old, Jesus loves me. But I say anxiety is not the same as our normal response to fear. Our normal rush of adrenaline is in the fight or flight response is not the same thing as anxiety ruling us.
And you even go so far as to say anxiety makes us sick, and it does. I know that personally. And this wonderful scripture you have here, Psalm 139, 23 and 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart. This is a terrific prayer to begin the pursuit of pulling that stronghold down and destroying it. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Let us be absolutely open to the Lord with our entire being and our thoughts and our feelings. I'm saying that, but here's what you say in this, what you list in the scripture. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Isn't that beautiful? That's scripture. God gives the scripture. He gives the command so that if you say yes, then he can come in and make it happen. So exciting. We can live a different life. And God has given us everything that we would be worried about. And he solved everything. He solved our sin. He solved our past. He solved our current. He solves everything and supplies you with everything. He doesn't leave you lacking anything. If we will just look to him for the answer and the power. Oh, see, I can just go on and on because it's so exciting to have it clear and identified. You have identified it and exposed this wickedness. And that's how it is. I see it as wickedness.
We hope you've enjoyed the Shulamite podcast. For all the latest from Shulamite Ministries, please visit us at shulamite.com, where you'll find Martha's daily devotions, posts from getalongwithgod.com, and the online library of all of Martha's writings. At shulamite.com, downloading the free Shulamite app is easy, and livingchristianbooks.com is only a click away. Thank you for joining us on this journey to discover a God worth knowing.